the marriage ceremony. That is why there are certain aspects which people used to look at. Are you of the same dignity, for instance? Are you not going to go into marriage with someone whom at a later stage you shall feel ashamed to move with such a person in public? What about the social status? Is that person presentable? Or you are like going into a situation whereby you are married with someone, but when you are going to social parties and so on, you don't want the public to acknowledge and recognize that this is your partner. That is why the issue of compatibility is so serious. What about the moral values? You know, we come from different training backgrounds. We come from different moral orientations. There are certain things whereby in your background, they were known to be okay. For instance, in some families, a woman can squat or she can stand while greeting the husband. In some families, this is not acceptable. So imagine if these two get married, you are going to find a situation whereby this one is looking at this as a wrong and the other one is looking at it as right, and there is no problem with that. What about the financial status? When you look at these elements, this is what made even scholars of Islam to discuss this issue of compatibility. That before you could conclude the marriage contract, ask yourself, am I compatible with so and so? What are the justifications for considering compatibility? The major justification here is Islam is after ensuring harmonious coexistence. That is after marriage. And as I have said, and I'm still emphasizing, that you are free to socialize, you are free to appear in the public without being offended, among others. Also, to ensure complementary roles. I'm a lecturer at a university. I would feel more comfortable to marry someone who has attained at least a master's degree, so that in case I am overwhelmed by some academic work, by some administrative work, she can help. But can you imagine getting married to someone who cannot even read the script in your profession? There used to be some jokes that are being cracked, that once you marry a person whose educational level is low, then you have to protect and safeguard your transfer title. Because at one moment, they'll get surprised that she can use them to lead the stove. Oh yes, it is possible because she actually doesn't know the value, she doesn't know the content, and that is why justification has been taken to be important. Now with that background, this brings us to a question. What are the categories of compatibility? What are the categories of uniformity? You will allow me to take my own approach because I didn't find it in any books. To me, I categorize compatibility into two. One, there is what we call the complementary, optional compatibility. It is up to you to take it or to disregard it. It is up to you to go with it because after all it is your right, or also it is your right to forego it. These are the positive compatibilities which might be considered or they might be foregone. In fact, even as far as Islam is concerned, it is up to you. You can choose to say that, let me go with him or let me go with her, or you can choose to say, no, in any way, I must consider this. So this is a complementary and this is an optional compatibility. It is up to you to take it, to consider it or not to consider it. The second is the necessary, the obligatory compatibility. I would like to prepare our audience here when we are looking at the necessary obligatory compatibility. There are some issues where, whether you want it or not, that person will never be compatible to you in Sharia. We are going to look at some of them, including what is the Islamic perspective on conducting nikah with a woman known to be pregnant. Is a pregnant woman compatible for marriage? And many other issues that we are going to look at. Now quickly, let us start by looking at the option of compatibility, which you can choose to take or you can forego it. The majority of the Muslim scholars are of the opinion that some of these considerations that we are going to look at, actually you can ignore them. It is up to you.
Doctor, before we continue.
Yes.
You are taking us through the categories of compatibility, and we are looking at the optional one and the obligatory one.
Yeah.
The optional one you can take, or you can give a second choice. The obligatory one, you will take us through what it is a must.
Yeah.
That it is a must. Now my question is, I don't know whether I can give another word to the word compatibility, whether it qualifies your... Can I say that who is the right one for me? Can that address compatibility? Like, is she the right one? Is he the right one? If I add, because the word compatibility looks to be doctor-ish, like, so I want it in my sister's way. Can I say it?
Not really. It's not who is right for me.
To you, what is compatibility?
Compatibility,
the one you are taking,
is a uniformity between the partners that can ensure a harmonious marriage life. You know? It is uniformity. Are we uniform? You know, some kind of similarities between the two. Of course, when I come into the detail, it shall be more clear. But at that level, there are certain considerations in Sharia which, whether you want it or not, you must consider them. Then others, it is your choice. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't forget, whether optional, whether compulsory, the objective was to ensure that the marriage life is harmonious. There might be some kind of magic, by the way. You might choose someone whom 100% you are not compatible. Even by the time you are leaving your family, people are like, let us include him in dua, or let us include her in dua. Then Allah brings his own miracles, and actually things work out. People start saying that, we never expected that this lady can be under that man even for 1 year. But now you are proceeding, it is 5 years, it is 10 years, and then life continues. But the scholars didn't want to leave this matter for granted. They wanted to give you some kind of safeguards, some kind of guarantees. If you choose to take them, then they might be helpful, even though it is also not a guarantee that when you choose someone who is compatible, that everything is going to be as desired. I hope that one is clear now. Now, what are some of the considerations? Consideration number one is religious commitment and practice. How many times have we emphasized this? Even in the prophetic hadith, whereby he said that choose the religious one. Choose the one who is committed, because whenever you have someone who is closer to you as far as respect to faith, respect to religious rites and practices, you are likely to move longer. You are likely to be in a happier life than a person whom, for instance, you are saying that, let's go for salah. And it's like, my dear, Allah looks at my heart. You are not the judge, among others. Chances are high that along the way, you are going to have misunderstandings and the marriage relationship is going to come to an end. That's why this has been so much emphasized by almost all scholars. Number two, the socio-economic status, you know, as I have just talked about. I have just talked about it. Socio-economic status is wide. You know, our orientation is different. Starting from the home in which you are, the kind of facilities that you have in your home are not actually the facilities that I, who grew in a rural area, I am having. MashaAllah, you have grown up in such a family whereby The fridges are there, the wide screen is there, you take what you want, you are fond of parties almost on every weekend, and now you want to get married to someone who has never experienced such. So socio-economic status here, it can affect. Then, the schools that you went to. When you look at this also, the school life is also affecting us. Because you know, the corporate culture. Just to have like a simple example here. A person who went through Islamic University in Uganda for his or higher education is not having the same orientation, university orientation, like someone who went for public institutions. What you feel that it is important here, it is not actually important to him. So when the two of you got married, chances are high that you are going to have misunderstandings on some issues whereby for you, they are not becoming, they are not okay, and for him it is okay. Then, the definition of quality. What constitutes quality, for instance? What is quality dressing? You know? What is, if you want, for instance, to go for parties, how do you look at it? All these are issues that come under the consideration of the socio-economic status. What about the networking and socialization groups? You know, because we are having different orientations, you are going to find out that even the people we relate with are different. So, you can consider the situation like after marriage, someone tells you that, please, I'm not comfortable with your friends. And for you, these are the friends that you grew up with, and you are actually very comfortable with them. Which kind of entertainment? For instance, some young people are, they are having, they are fans of music. Then others are not. What about the stories that you are going to share? You know, sometimes you are married to someone and the kind of stories talking about, to you they are just boring stories. So, it is another aspect that you need to look at, the socio-economic status. Another point is freedom from defects. Physical defects. If, for instance, you are not having any physical defect, are you comfortable to marry someone who is having a certain physical defect like a blindness? Like the person is dumb? A person may be suffering from such serious illnesses like a leprosy? Among others. So the scholars addressed these matters, but don't forget that these are among the optional considerations. You might say, I have no problem to marry someone who is blind. But at the same time, you should also be ready for, to be patient with such a person. What about the age difference? You know, this is one of the matters that is debatable. Some time back, the emphasis was the age difference should be around, if the man is, let's say 30, the woman should be around 25. That used to be an acceptable one. It is acceptable. But as situations changed these days, by the way, parents are now more comfortable to place their young daughters or their daughters in the hands of those who have experienced. And that's why these days don't get surprised that the rate at which young ladies are getting into polygamous relationship is high. Because parents now feel some kind of guarantee. But these young boys who have not yet experienced, you know, something small, it culminates into a misunderstanding, then I have sent you back. So, how do you look at the age difference? As you might be comfortable with someone whereby the age difference is not so wide, but also think about the other side whereby a person whose age difference, maybe it is 10 years, 15 years, might be, by the way, an understanding man, and so on and so forth. then look at issues like civilization, among others. So, these are some of the issues that scholars looked at. Of course, I have also talked about the educational level. You know, all of us, especially that we have gone to school, you feel that when you go back home with someone who is below your education level, even the family is like, it is not welcoming it. Now, my take here is, some cases, or in some cases where these matters have been considered, they have worked out. In some cases, they have worked out. That you are a university graduate, you also married a university graduate, things are okay. But also, in some cases, actually, they have failed. You know? Because if we overemphasize on the issue of compatibility, one, there's some kind of promotion of materialism. If you are coming from a family whereby it is a rich family, you don't want a man from a poor family to come. In this case, you are promoting materialism. Not only that, but I am aware of certain countries, especially in Asia, whereby women have died and been buried with their virginities because they did not get their compatibles. In other words, a woman stays in the parent home under the pretext, or the pretense that no one has come to us who is compatible. Such situations have taken place. Now, in the era of women emancipation, in the era of equality, there are certain situations which have come on board. In my physical class, I could see some students of the law school. Go and talk to them. If you try to carry out a simple survey, you might find out that the majority of lawyers, they actually don't want to marry fellow lawyers. What is the problem if we are talking about compatibility? In other words, if I'm a lawyer, and you are also a lawyer, chances are high that we shall reach the conclusion easily, isn't it? It would have been like that. But actually the opposite. Lawyers are not comfortable to marry fellow lawyers because they are worried that their home is going to be turned into a courtroom whereby cross-examination. This time, examination in chief. This time, adduce evidence. This time, the burden of proof. This time, fair trial. So, a fellow lawyer says, I'd rather go for a social scientist. I'd rather go for social work. I even rather go for a senior 6 graduate. Those situations have taken place, and I think you're witnesses to this. Accountants might not be interested to marry fellow accountants. Even when you come to us who trained in religious education, very few sheikhs actually are comfortable to marry sheikhs. Yet you could think that this is compatibility. The moment I say, قال الله تعالى, the sheikh will just say, Allah has said. But we are worried also that our homes can be turned into having 2 muftis in one home. A mufti, I issue a religious decision or verdict, she also issues the other. I say it is time for Salah. Then she says, but Dhuhr's time is somehow expanded. So we are having 2 muftis in home. So at the end of the day, we are likely to clash over some matters, and then at the end of the day, our marriage is not going to be harmonious. At this point, I want to caution families to try as much as possible, especially to have one madhab, to have one school of thought that they are following. Some of the cases that have come to my attention, you have a wife who doesn't believe in a certain aspect. of religion, by the way. Like you know that most of our matters, by the way, are matters of, there is controversy. Imam Malik says this, Abu Hanifa says this. Now the woman is of the madhab school of thought. And then the man is maybe of another school of what? Thought. Then it becomes a problem. What about marriage among the corporate class? I think it would have been okay if we are both in the corporate class, but we have seen situations whereby things are not working out. So from the Islamic perspective, as I said, you can choose to consider or you can choose not to consider. Why?